For professional speakers out there hoping to become thought leaders, publishing a book is an absolute necessity to establish their credibility in their field. Most of them already know this. But for many, the concept of personal branding and using their published book to get more speaking opportunities is still a point of concern. Today, we have with us here Mr. Pravin Shekar. For those of you who don't know Pravin, he is an award-winning outlier marketer and a parallel entrepreneur who has authored 4 books, including How to Get My First Paid Speaking Gig, a simple action-oriented guide for public speakers to scale up their speaking career. Pravin is also the founding member and secretary of the Professional Speakers Association of India. Pravin, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for taking the time to have a chat with me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Sushant.
Right. So let's get started. So as an entrepreneur, consultant, author, and a professional speaker, you are somebody who dons many hats, right? But the one underlying thing that is common in all these roles is also something that you really pride yourself on, which is the fact that you are an amazing storyteller. So how important do you think this attribute is when it comes to professional speaking as a career?
Storytelling, Sushant. Why don't I start with a story that I very recently heard from another professional speaker, Sudhir Rao. But this is, of course, my narrative of the story, a story of Raj, who had just opened up a newer office, and therefore they had a small puja in the office to propitiate the gods and get everything set. Everything was set, but Raj did not want to start. And the whole office wanted to know why. He said, I need to have a cat in a cage in front of the office if I have to start. A pretty odd request. So his office ran around. Somebody's pet cat was brought in a cage, kept in the front, and then the ritual was done. But Raj's colleagues, and more specifically Raj's best friend who was also there, was very curious. So he said, hey, Raj, what is this? I said, no, that's how it is in my house. Anything new, any new initiative, any start, there's got to be a cat in a cage in front of the house or the office. But Raj's friend Anand was very curious. So they went back home, and Anand asked Raj's dad. I said, no, that's the way it was done. Why didn't we ask my dad? So they called Raj's grandfather. And then Raj's grandfather narrated a story that his father, Raj's great-grandfather, brought in a cat as a pet into the house. And theirs was a very traditional house, so-called, where no animals were allowed inside, or maybe they were just scared. However, his great-grandfather, being a pet of the family, was allowed to bring the pet in, except whenever there is a ritual or something going on, the cat had to be in a cage in front of the house, never inside.
Okay.
As the family grew and dispersed, they forgot the why part, except they just remembered that there's got to be a cat in a cage in the front of the house or the office. That is a story. This is my narrative of the story. And the lesson is, that's the way things have been done here. We forget to ask, why have things been done the way they are? Mm-hmm. And the new mode, Sushant, to answer your question, that has always been the mode, is when I tell it with a story, the next time you catch yourself saying, hey, but that's the way it's been done. The image in your mind is going to be a cat in a cage in the front of the house or the office, and you're going to stop yourself saying, hey, I'm not falling for the cat in the cage trick. So this is stories stick, stories sell.
Right.
And here, your question, I'm underlining the fact that stories are important with a story and my narrative. A story is a story, but each one of us tells it in a different way, adds a whole bunch, and that becomes the narrative. But that answers your question as well, Sushant.
Right, and I think one of the things that a lot of people miss, when it comes to marketing, at least, is people tend to focus more on the platform than the message that goes out to the end user. So I think very well put. The message is what actually matters, regardless of the platform, right? So so one thing, as a professional speaker, you obviously give a lot of keynote speeches. The one topic that you cover in many of your keynote speeches is the art of personal branding. And, as somebody who's worked with aspiring professional speakers before, what are some of the most important things one needs to keep in mind when it comes to personal branding?
3 things, and I'm going to make it in layman terms. People can take me to court for it, but then this is my view, and this is how I tell. I need to know who I am, what I stand for. When I am clear who I am, what is the change that I'm going to bring about, I call that marketing. When I am very clear who I am, I become a marketer. But when I tell you, Sushant, who I am, that is advertising. And I can tell it in various different ways. When Sushant picks up the phone and tells his friend who Praveen is, that becomes branding. And when you tell it exactly the way as I want you to understand, comprehend, and tell,
Mm-hmm.
it resonates from a branding perspective. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. When I say Praveen Shekar, what is the word or term that comes to your mind?
As somebody who's seen a lot of your speeches, who's interacted with you, the one word that comes to my mind is outlier marketer.
Right. So when I want you or any of your friends to see the mustache and the look in this particular frame, unconventional, non-traditional, an outlier as opposed to the rest. And therefore, I am very clear who I am. And I unashamedly tell you that this is the term that I want to be known for. This is anything that I do comes in the unconventional part of it. And
Absolutely.
when somebody asks you, hey, I want somebody who's different, who's really different, who's not just saying he's different,
Mm.
but looks, talks, walks, consults, everything is different, the term outlier marketing comes, and I'm shamelessly in. And that comes the branding part of it.
Right.
So when I am not clear, my communication is not going to be clear, and you're going to say, hey, some motivational speaker. There's enough motivational speakers outside. Who are you?
Right.
And who do you want to influence? My tribe is small. My tribe is handpicked.
Mm-hmm.
My tribe is CEOs and CMOs and aspiring CMOs of growth stage companies. So
Right.
that's the tribe that I would write for, talk for. And
Mm-hmm.
once that is clear, the art of personal branding, Sushant, takes care of itself when you are clear what you want to do.
And I think I remember like the one thing that also stands out, even the first book that you ever published in Devil Does Care, it has it has the mustache in the front cover itself, and it's again one thing that you do to establish your personal branding across everything that you do, whether it's like public speaking or like publishing a book as an author. I think that's something that you really stick to. Right. So, Praveen, we've covered, what are the important aspects of branding for speakers and how publishing a book is also a really critical part of the whole brand building process. But the one thing that our viewers would really like to learn more about is how to use their book to get more speaking opportunities for themselves. And as somebody who's actually written a book about this in detail, how did you go about doing this?
One, get really good mentors and guides. They've helped me where I am today. But what's the most important is if I need to impress you, Sushant, or if the word impress is not a boy impressing a girl, but impress upon my message, impress
Right.
upon my brand, it becomes necessary for me to reach out to you in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can say I'm a professional speaker, I am, but what do I do as a professional speaker? I influence, I act as a catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
I am looking at changing your thought or behavior or action.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm doing it from a stage, how do I continue it? I can say, come visit my website or go there and download. Or,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's a copy of my book, pick it up.
Right.
It becomes a continuation of my role as a messenger, as a catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
Now, thanks to this COVID part, professional speaking has taken a beating, but it's going to bounce back. However, all the associated aspects from a professional speaking perspective
Mm-hmm.
work. And I'm going to tell you how. Somebody calls me up and says, Praveen, I read your book. I resonate with what you say. Would it be possible for you to speak to my leadership team?
Mm-hmm.
So I go and speak to the leadership team, and the leadership team checks my website, but also picks up copies of my books. And they
Right.
spread the books. They
Right.
spread the books to people like them who are exactly the kind of people that I want to target for my messaging.
Mm-hmm.
So a book becomes a brochure that they buy.
Right.
It becomes a point for me to spread my word across.
Mm-hmm.
They pick up the book and then they call up and say, Praveen, I'd like a coffee or a chat.
Mm-hmm.
Can we look at some consulting? Praveen, I'd like to bounce an idea. Or, hey, I'm having a session in my office and I want you to come and address the team. When I address the team, the books get caught. With the books, my tribe increases and it comes right back, which is why if you look at people like me, Sushant, I prefer coming out with more number of focused niche books for that tribe.
Yeah.
And it becomes, it's a good circle to have. You call about something called the circle of trust. Here, I am adding value, building trust. and that circle keeps becoming thicker and thicker and becoming more concentric. So if you ask me, my professional speaking career has received a phenomenal boost by me being an author. And relating back to the previous response, I know who I am, I know who I'm looking at influencing, whose life I want to change, and I write for them.
Right.
So when I reach that particular audience, I get that response. I know I have a bestseller in my hand and I decide what that bestseller is. I do not follow the Wall Street Journal or New York Times for my writing, because I'm writing for a specific set to bring about that change. And I can vouch for it that a book continues to sell even during COVID times. The consulting part from the book continues to come through, and speaking gigs continue to come. So I speak, the book acts as a supplement. The book becomes the main part, with my speaking becoming a supplement. So that's a slightly longer answer, Sushant, but I am a big believer that content has to reach the way your audience is looking at consuming it.
Right, right. Yeah, I think one thing that you also mentioned is using your book as a business card, which is something that a lot of professional speakers are actually focusing on. You know,
Which they pay for.
right. It's the only business card that somebody actually pays you for, right? So yeah, very well put, Praveen. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I'm sure our viewers had a lot of insight into scaling up their careers as professional speakers from our conversation today. Thank you so much again, and good luck with all your ventures.
Thank you very much.